Thank you for browsing page 121. Today we're going to jump into the Core Rulebook 2022 update, and we're going to look at misjumps. Yes, misjumps, that dreaded thing. I like misjumps. I like that they're a thing in Traveler. I have a few cautions about them, but in any case, we're going to discuss what a misjump is and then how to deal with it. On rare occasions, normally because of lack of maintenance or using unrefined fuel, a ship can misjump. Many misjumps are lethal, causing the jump bubble to collapse early or for time in the bubble to flow. Gotta go to the next page. Differently. So the trillions of subjective years pass inside the bubble, and all that comes out the other end is hard radiation caused by protons exceeding their half-life. That's not a fun night's role-playing, by the way, just FYI. And then we have all the details on how you can roll for a misjump. I'm not going to go into those details as such. And this would be if you have an effect of -1, you would spend an extra 1 days in jump than normal. And then if your effect is -2, the jump arrives in the target system, finds itself a number of hundreds of diameters away from the intended world multiplied by 1 die. So you could be 600 diameters out. If a worse effect is rolled, a merciful referee may wish to subject the travelers to the most survivable form of misjump, where the ship ends up 1 die times 1 die parsecs in a random direction, potentially in deep and empty space. That's the old go-to for Traveler, is that you misjump, you arrive X number of weeks later, and you arrive, 22 parsecs away from where you had planned on being. That's all well and good, and definitely makes for good role-playing, because now your characters have to deal with the fact that they're not where they're supposed to be, and they're low on fuel potentially. How are they going to deal with all the situation? Another temptation with a misjump is to put players in an empty system. You got to be careful with that. Putting players in an empty system is tantamount to a death sentence. I would only ever do that if it was part of my story. If I was going to do a story arc where the players, for whatever reason, had misjumped, and their misjump put them in an empty sector of space, I would want to see how they would try to get out of this situation, because of course they'd need fuel, and how would they get fuel? And this is assuming, by the way, that when you complete the jump, you are out of fuel. There are other ships that have multiple jumps, fuel enough for multiple jumps. So that's not as big a crisis in a misjump for them, although it can be. But I'm just talking about, like, if it's a jump 1 ship and suddenly it misjumps and it ends up in an empty sector of space. How do they get out of that? They don't have any fuel. They can't jump. They only have a few weeks of maneuver. What are they going to do? Well, that's where I would set it as a role-playing part of my adventure and not just a random thing. I might go ahead and put them in an empty sector and see what they do. Let the players work on it for a little bit. How do we find fuel? And I would wait for them to start making suggestions. And this would be the role-playing end of it, because then you have players that are going to have to turn around and say, okay, wait a minute, my guy has pilot 3, he's been in the Navy, he would know about this stuff. What can I do to find fuel? Or you have another guy who's been an engineer in the Merchant Marines or something, and he has lots of experience aboard a ship, so where do we find fuel? And the answer is you can find fuel a couple of different places in a, quote, empty sector, unquote, or empty system, rather, unquote. And that would be any kind of rogue comet or other large body that's passing through the area, or even a rogue planet. Ideally, a rogue gas giant would be your best bet, although gravity would be potentially interesting. But the point is, if you're going to put them in an empty system, you've got to give them a way out. I would only ever do that as part of my game. I would not let random rolls stick the players in an empty system, just because that's not the way I would run the game. I'm not saying you can't do it, because of course you can. The book gives you rules on how to do it. How can you tell you're in a misjump? Well, by Mongoose's rules, you really don't know for sure until it's breakout time, when it's time for the jump bubble to collapse and you're going to be coming out of jump and returning to normal space. I like older versions of Traveler better, because one of the ways to tell if there's a misjump is in the first hour or so after you've entered jump, over half the people run for the bathroom. So your choices are, they've either undercooked the chicken for the pre-jump meal, or something's gone wrong, you're in a misjump, something's affected some inner ears, people are throwing up, have diarrhea. That's my favorite way to tell if it's a misjump. My own personal encounter with misjumps, I've never actually run one. I've never GM'd a misjump. As I said, it's something that should be rare. If you have a situation where your players are misjumping a fair amount of time, I mean, Civilization wouldn't use jump then. If it's just not safe, they wouldn't use it. So jump should be extremely rare. And the one time I had a misjump was early in my Traveler days. We were playing an active duty military campaign, and the GM had ruled that for whatever reason, just a fluke in the dice, we had misjumped. And that was part of his story. And the misjump in this case, we all, half of us ran for the freshers right after we entered jump space. And some of us were ill through the entire time. And then our breakout was about 6 days late. And we broke out slightly away from where we had intended. So it was a true misjump in that we were in jump space much longer than we had thought. And we appeared somewhere else. Also, the GM had ruled that time had passed strangely, so that we actually only experienced about 5 subjective days while we were in jump for something like 13. So that was kind of neat. I thought that was nice. It was a way to kind of introduce jump without freaking us out as players and showing what could happen if a bad event happened with your jump, and definitely use refined fuel and things like that. And he did it without smashing us over the head with it or turning us into radiation or otherwise really messing us up. It was just an interesting thing that he did and had us worried for about an hour in game while we were in jump space and worrying about what we were going to do. So that's it. I've never run a misjump. I'm not saying I wouldn't. In fact, this has got me thinking about the possibility of putting one into a game soon, because I would like to see how my players react to it. But I would only ever do so if, as the GM, I'd already determined that there's some kind of fuel source in the same area. And keep in mind, a system is a huge place. So even if you find that comet way, way off in the distance, it may take you a while, like days and days and days, to get to that comet. Will you have enough fuel to refuel as you crack the ice of the comet and then make your way back into jump space? That can be some dynamic tension for your group. That can be a very good role-playing thing. So I'm not against misjumps. I'm against frequent misjumps. In my opinion, a misjump should be something that, an old Navy hand is telling in a bar because he once misjumped and that's his story of how they misjumped. Or once in a while in the news, some ship will go missing and a misjump is suspected. But it should not be common by any means, because otherwise nobody would use jump drive. But that's all I've got today on misjumps. I do recommend them as storytelling devices. I don't recommend them as a result of dice. And I certainly wouldn't do a total party kill with a misjump, because that's kind of boring. But let me know what you think. Is this something you've used in your game to build a little tension? Maybe I'm missing something that, some aspect of misjump that can be a lot of fun. I know there have been misjumps where players have traveled through time also. I'm not a huge time travel fan in role-playing games for the most part. I'll do a time travel story now and again. I've never done one in Traveler. But it's an interesting way you could have them do it. And then, of course, they have to do the old Star Trek thing of, well, we got here by X, so we have to reverse this cycle, and we'll get home by that. And somehow in Star Trek, that always works. But that's all I've got today on page 121. I want to thank for your time. Thanks for watching. Please leave a like and subscribe if you like the video. Tell your friends. Please take a look at the Patreon. Help me out there. And may all your jumps be true.